What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
It would change our entire understanding of all of history. Eridu is a piece that fits into a much bigger puzzle that we're about to uncover that we haven't even done yet. But this is like the beginning of something greater we're about to go over. It's a story that has been deliberately hidden so that we don't know it ever exists. And so we think it's a myth and it's not real. Now remember, in the tablets, so the Sumerian king list and Eridu Genesis and Myth of Adapa and Instructions of Shrupak, I could go on and on. They all talk about how Eridu is part of 5 cities created. 5 original cities are created in the ancient world, the very beginning, where civilization started. Eridu was the first. The last one was called Shrupak.
We haven't talked about that yet, right?
No. Okay. Shrupak is where this entire thing is about to go in terms of the story. Okay? Shrupak, in some ways, is as important as Eridu. Now, in having said that, they discovered Shrupak in 1931. So another myth all of a sudden became a reality. These places that weren't supposed to be real, that were like a myth, all of a sudden became a real place on the ground. And so they started excavating Shrupak in 19...
How do you spell Shrupak?
Yep, it's Shuruppak.
Okay, so they start excavating Shrupak in
1931.
Okay. All right, keep going.
Okay. So they started excavating in 1931, and there was, during the excavations, they did some interesting things. Again, they're trying to prove that these things in the tablets, if they could be true, if there's any merit to them at all. And again, this was sort of like curiosity for them at this point. I think it's because when they actually started to find them, then the control system really came into place. Because when they originally went to Eridu, they seemed like they really were like genuinely wanted to know if it was real, which is what that 1946 to 48 little parade thing was they did there, okay?
There's an ant on there. You can flick them. There you go.
So they find Shrupak in 1931, and I'm going to pass this over to you, and I want you to see how deep they had to go.
And you're going to give me this digital file so I can put this on the screen right now?
Yep.
Okay.
They dig down and...
Holy shit.
So what they found that was bizarre to them is that originally they didn't believe in the flood story. So they didn't really believe that there was an ancient city that had been destroyed from a flood. That's the whole point of this, is that we're taking myth and turning it into reality, and it's leading to an untold story. So they excavate down, they get 45 feet down, 45 feet. And they finally find the ruins of Shrupak. Can you imagine how much soil that is? Debris?
Do they have any concept of how deep it really goes?
Well, but I don't know that, but that's not the point. The point was they then backtracked like they did at Göbekli Tepe, and they analyzed the 45 feet in between the ruins of Shrupak, deep underground, whatever, and they analyzed this 45 feet above it. They found no human remains, and they found no human evidence at all.
What the
So they're like, wait. So this flood couldn't have been real. It must have just been like a little regional thing. But then they expected to find other evidence of civilizations that had cohabited and lived there. They found none.
Did they have any concept while they were doing this of approximately how old some of the other things they were?
No, because they're still working off the timeline of thinking that it's like 5,000 years old.
And they're not doing like carbon dating and shit.
No, well, they can't. It's too old for that.
Yeah.
So they find yet another city, and this time, though, it's buried by so much sediment that it gives complete evidence to the deluge of being this massive amount of like mud and debris that was like laid down in this region, which is why they never rebuilt or lived in any of them again. Now, that's not the same as everywhere else in the world. As we're going to see in some other incredible ruins, other cultures decided to build on top. But for the reasons of how catastrophic this flood was in that region, it was buried under so much debris that the people that came later didn't even know it existed.
Wow.
Okay, so this is what got me, and then I started to like sort of blow my mind, because I was like, how old is Shrupak? right? I found my answer in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is how you have to do this. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I love telling this story because it's one of my favorites. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the part that nobody's ever read is this part where Gilgamesh goes on this journey and he's trying to seek out immortality. And in the and I want anyone to go read it. Like, don't take any of my word for it. Go verify everything I'm saying. But in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh is supposed to be a tyrant king of the city of Uruk, which they then end up finding Uruk. Okay? But it's from a different time period. Gilgamesh is not from the same time period as Shuruppak. And we find that out later. Because what happens is, but Gilgamesh is ancient. That's the thing. He's already an ancient king, but he's from that 6,000 year timeline window. Okay? He's from a different time period. And we know that because of this. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh has to cross into the underworld, and this boatman takes him. Okay? When he gets there, he goes to meet the last king of Shuruppak, the figure that became Noah. His name is Untandapishtim, or in the Epic of Gilgamesh, his name is Ziusudra. These guys often had different names during different time periods in history.
But then they get crossed over into different religious texts, so to speak.
Yes. So Gilgamesh goes and he meets Untandapishtim Ziusudra.
Which one was that again?
That's the Noah figure. That's the last king of Shuruppak. So Ziusudra is supposed to be an ancient king. I mean, more ancient than any of the others that we're talking about. He's supposed to be a king that's from what they call the Old World. The Old World is when these in the tablets describe this, is when the first 5 cities were created here. That's the Old World. That's it. That's all that was there. And then this disaster comes through and like wipes them all out. Then they had to like restart over again and then create things in different places. That's where this is going. But the point is that Gilgamesh meets with Ziusudra, who's the last king of Shuruppak before these events occur. And he's no longer in this realm anymore. Okay? He says to him, Gilgamesh, you come to me to seek the secrets of immortality. I wish to tell you a story so ancient that it's long before you. In the city of Shuruppak, he basically says where I lived. He says, I love how he says this. He says, Shuruppak was a city so ancient to you that you know nothing of it. It's like mind-blowing, right? We're talking about something so old that it's before what we even think of as ancient. And he said, the city was old. He said, and the gods once were in it and walked in it. That's what he says. He says the gods walked in it and were in the city like among men. Again,
Could this be some sort of
I know what you're saying, but if you read the tablets, they talk about how they ended up leaving and not coming back to our realm and like leaving it to us. Mm-hmm. That's what they say. They no longer like came back anymore, really. Mm-hmm. And then we just sort of became kind of chaotic. But he says, and he talks about how that city was far more ancient to him. And then he mentions how Etana was there. Now, I know this might not mean anything to you, but if we're trying to figure out when things happened and how we place things, you'll learn if we go back that there was a legend of Etana, which is a tablet that talked about how there's an ancient king of Etana who was the first king after these cities had been destroyed in a great catastrophe and they had to rebuild the new world. Etana was supposed to be the first king of the new world from a city called Kish. But when Gilgamesh goes, Etana's already dead. Etana's already is a ghost. He says the ghost of Etana. So what I'm trying to say is we now can like lay this all out. We know that Shuruppak was part of the first cities ever created. Then we know that Etana ruled at another time period when civilization tried to reemerge again. And then we know that Gilgamesh came far after that. So, see what I'm saying here?
Yes.
Now we're like putting the whole thing together. And the tablets are revealing their secrets if we know where to look. Okay? So, the question is, what happened to Ziusudra? And I had gotten to that point and I was stuck. I was stuck for years. I didn't know where else to go. I laid that whole thing out.
How fast did you get to that point?
That took me like 5 years.
Okay.
But I was at because I had to
wow.
read every tablet and then cross-reference every single one with every place and every king mentioned, and then try to list them all based on when they lived, based on tiny little clues of who they met along the way and different things, right? But I was stuck. I will admit to people listening to this, I was like stuck. I'm like, I don't understand how does that connect to Atlantis? How does that connect to the megaliths of Peru? How does that connect to the pyramids of Egypt? Like, how does any of this connect? And I feel like in our community, we've been stuck there for a long time, not understanding how any of it connects.
Or we never got there.
Well, no, we didn't until now. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Now let's change history, my friend.
Let's do it. I'm here for it.
So this fell into my lap by some very interesting means, I will say. I don't know how it happened. It just did. I became aware of a site called Zernaki Tepe. And Zernaki Tepe is in eastern Turkey, not that close to Göbekli Tepe. Quite a ways away.
How do you spell it?
Zernaki.
And then Tepe.
Yep. So Tepe just means mountain or hill.
Yep.
So these are all just different names for that.
Zernaki Tepe, Turkey. I'm going to pull up the map.
Thank you.
We have that. We'll put that in the middle.
Yeah. And that's actually awesome. I want you to click that right there.
Picture.
That mountain, you see the ancient terraces? That entire mountain is a lost civilization.
Underneath it.
They've only excavated 1% of that entire area. Excavations of Zernaki Tepe.
When was this found?
Zernaki Tepe has only been discovered and started to be excavated since 2014. We are
Who found it?
I don't know the name of the person, but I think it was Istanbul University out of Turkey.
No
But they have no idea what it is. They're labeling it as the Eurasian civilization, which in a very similar way to something like the Hittites, were only a later iteration of another culture that came later and built on top of it. Okay?
Okay.
So, this is how basically the whole thing started, is that I became very curious of Zernaki Tepe because of one thing in particular. If you want to click this.
Yeah, I have it open on this other tab right here. I'll put this in the
Or if you want to zoom in on the maps, you can just see where we are.
Let's start with the picture you
Okay.
have. Because I pulled the map up. I probably have already had that on the screen in the post
so
edit.
there's a lake in eastern Turkey called Lake Van, and it's an absolutely incredible lake. It's one of the most high elevation lakes in the world. In fact, it's very similar to Lake Titicaca, which, you know, if people are familiar with the incredible Tiwanaku civilization at the southern flanks of Lake Titicaca, it's another one of these lost civilizations that's got advanced technology that we don't understand where they came from or who they are.
Lake Titicaca is in which country?
Lake Titicaca spans the border of Bolivia and Peru, and it's the highest navigable lake in the world. Okay? Now, in eastern Turkey is one of the other largest high elevation lakes in the world called Lake Van. No small lake. It is 1,500 feet deep.
A lake.
A lake. Okay?
Christ, what's down
It's like
there?
an
The Loch
entrance
Ness
into the
Monster?
underworld, right? Lake Titicaca is the same thing. Lake Titicaca is over 1,000 feet deep. There seems to be an interest in these like ancient lakes. That's all I can say.
I didn't even know lakes could get that deep.
With volcanoes around them. Now,
Oh,
okay.
dun dun dun.
So I want you to, can you go down? I wanted to click an image on this. Scroll
course I
down.
can.
Keep going. Right there.
This one.
Right there. Click that.
All right, hold on.
Okay.
I'm gonna open this in a new. The number of tabs
If-
I have is.
If
oh my God.
one of the things that I've been studying for about 6 years straight, and I worked with some of the greatest in the field. I'd say the greatest megalithic expert in terms of studying the architecture of megaliths would be Brian Forrester and then Ben from Uncharted X that we talked about before.
Yeah, that's Danny's boy.
They are-
By the way, for people out there, if you haven't seen the Concrete podcast with Ben Van Kerwick, which was
Yes,
the first
thank you, Ben
one,
Van Kerwick.
incredible.
So Ben and Brian and me, we're sort of like we focus on studying the architecture of these incredible megaliths left behind from we team and others like Graham Hancock do, the lost civilizations of Earth. Okay, now when you look at the type of architecture and sophistication of blocks in parts of Egypt, like the Valley Temple, the King's Chamber, and the Great Pyramid of Giza, or in parts of like the Corona Concha around Cusco, Peru, and Machu Picchu, we find evidence of this building technique that is incredibly advanced, using very, very hard rocks in a way where we have no idea how they did it. Ben talks about this a lot in Egypt, how we find saw marks and drill holes in places like Abu Sir and other areas where the tools that they created, not only do we not have never found a single tool, but we have no idea how they did it. Because we know that something like Bronze Age tools from the time period we're told would be too soft to manipulate any of these stones or the level of precision that they are, okay? I want to lay that foundation down. Yeah. So once you know what to look for, you essentially see it all around the world. Not everywhere, but you'll see it in a lot of different ancient parts of the world, like Peru, Bolivia. You see it in some parts of Mexico, like Mitla. You'll see it in like around the Valley Temple and the Great Pyramids of Giza. You see it throughout some parts of Turkey that we haven't talked about, like San Simeon. And you see it in megaliths in parts of Greece. Anyway, there are megaliths in these aspects of these civilizations that are all around the world. And I became very fixated on focusing on what they look like and looking for the telltale evidence of them, okay? That basically became one of the only things we have left, is the whole point I'm trying to make. It's one of the only things we have left to prove that those sophisticated civilizations were there. Because when we're talking about some of the stonework that they did, some of the tight fits we're gonna see in Turkey as well as Egypt, places like in Japan, places like in Peru, I don't believe that we could create what they did today. I really don't think we could. Take, for instance, the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's 2.5 million stone blocks that average between 8 and 15 tons each. We're told that was built with slave labor, but even if that was true, they would have had to lay like 100 to 150 a day.
I'm really afraid to go into this because I don't want to get you off track.
I know.
I
Totally.
Let's bring it back to ask you a lot about this. So can we come back to pyramids
Absolutely.
so that we don't lose the other one?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The point is there that these archetypes and architects were so far beyond us that they were doing things that we don't understand today. Connecting to the cosmos, using tools and potential materials. Like, just as an example, just to throw out there, but the granite blocks that are in the King's Chamber, some of them are over 20 to 30 tons above the King's Chamber. That's made with a type of rose granite, and Ben's talked about this, type of rose granite that only comes from 500 miles away. 500 miles away, that granite we know came from a certain quarry in Aswan. Okay? Which means that they were very specific with the type of stone that they wanted to use for these. It had nothing to do with just grabbing whatever was lying around. So there's energetic properties, and so they could withstand time. Various reasons they did this. Now, here's was another bizarre thing to prove Turkey was connected to Egypt. In Karnak, there's a famous travertine block. It's a type of material called travertine. It's extremely hard. Beautiful, though. It's this huge block of travertine that's sitting there. And travertine's not found in Egypt, not found in Africa.
Was it ever?
No.
How do we know that?
Because the nearest deposits of travertine is a very rare type of rock.
Yeah, I don't know shit about it.
The nearest deposits of travertine are in Turkey.
But could it have been?
No, because there's always remnants of deposits left. You can't just exhaust an entire deposit. It just means it's not economical to mine anymore. I'm actually a miner, someone that likes to prospect in gold. And so it's like there would be evidence of those elements existing somewhere, and they're never been documented there. Meaning that they carried a multi-ton block, or moved, I should say. I shouldn't say carried. I should say moved. A multi-ton block over 1,000 miles. So you want to say 500. You want to say 500 for Aswan in Egypt. How about 1,000 for Karnak? So the ancient world, they didn't do anything like we think they would do. They were like on a completely different level.
What you're saying is they had capabilities that we can't process.
Exactly. So let's go find where that story goes and how it connects to Atlantis and the ancient Athenians, okay? So in the image you have of Zernaki Tepe that you had up a second ago, the type of megalithic blocks they're uncovering there shouldn't be there. They should not be there. That type of sophistication is something we only see in like Egypt and in Peru. It's very, very interesting because it seems to come out of nowhere in a region that has nothing around it relative to that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why in a second. There's a whole explanation for how this emerged out of nowhere in this region. So Zernaki Tepe was the first thing that triggered me to something going on. I've been studying Zernaki Tepe for 6 to 8 months now. But it was the
So
only.
this is relatively new.
Oh yeah, this is all super, super new. But the foundation had been laid
Sure,
for
sure.
this to all happen, right?
Yeah.
So I become aware of Zernaki Tepe, and I was like, what is this? Because they found an ancient king list at Zernaki Tepe that was written in cuneiform and had connections all the way back to Sumer. And like the whole thing was getting kind of bizarre because that's quite a ways from that region up there. It's in far eastern Turkey near Mount Ararat. I want people to remember Mount Ararat. So I'm scoping out Zernaki Tepe, putting a lot of stuff together. I was going to do like a whole workshop on it until I realized it was only one tiny little part of something much greater. And that came when I discovered two other major sites that are just being uncovered now. And I mean just being uncovered. One of them, called Kef Kalesi, was just found in 2017. Okay?
These are, as far as
That's
excavation
why-
goes, this is brand fucking
That's
new.
why I'm saying that. That's why this is so exciting.
But you know what's good, and maybe this is totally like, way too innocent on my end
Okay.
because I'm not in this world. But they're being found. Places.
Yes.
What was the first one you said? University of Istanbul
Yeah.
founded and whatever. So there's places that aren't necessarily like Oxford or something like that
Yeah.
that you think, ooh, maybe it's Masters of the Universe, and people are looking and people are finding and they're being announced. They're not being
Yes.
covered up at
Well,
this point.
Announced is interesting because I don't really know anyone that knows about these. Now,
Well, how did you find out about it again?
just randomly, I was looking.
Define random.
I would say that I think one day I was looking at megaliths and some picture of Zernaki Tepe of the blocks there popped up, and I immediately identified it as being, what is that? And then a long story short, stumbled upon the fact that it was a new site that had just been uncovered.
Have you talked to anyone who's been on the site?
Ben hasn't been there yet, but he knows about it. I talked to him last time I spoke with him.
And has he talked to someone who's been on the site?
No, his answer was that there's a lot of incredible sites that are being uncovered in Turkey right now.
Well, that narrows it down. Okay.
Okay, so
All right, continue.
Yeah, so I start really looking into everything I can on Zernaki Tepe. The level of sophistication there is just it shouldn't be there, is what I'm saying. And the fact that there's ancient king lists that mimic Sumer got my attention. And so, but I kind of sat there with it. I didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to just talk about the megaliths and talk about how it's a basic mountain over the lake. It's very cool, actually. Do you want to go to the map really quick?
Sure.
The actual map.
You tell me, sire, I shall do. The Google map.
No, you were just on it, but you can do it again.
Well, let me open up a new one because
Okay.
there's some of these images I'm going to forget, though, because it resets. Like, the
Sure.
number of tabs I have for this
Yeah, I get it.
episode right now are fucking insane.
Again, and for the purposes of this, let's just leave the lake. So Lake Von. I just type in Lake Von.
Lake, how do you spell?
VAN.
Oh, that's easy. Lake Von, Turkey.
Yeah.
There it is.
Okay, so
It's not a Turkish ass name. I got it.
all right, so put on that for a minute.
Satellite?
I like terrain.
Like that?
Hold your mouse over.
Oh, I see. Oh, there's choices.
Yeah,
Wait, why?
you hold it over it and then you click it.
Terrain?
Terrain. Okay. All right.
Oh,
so
shit. Look at that.
Mount Ararat is right there. Mount Ararat is less than 100 miles away, and that's an important point I want to bring up because that's the key between this. Now, so here's Lake Von. In Lake Von, Zernaki Tepe is located at the northern end of the lake, and I had initially not known anything else was there. Nor did really anybody else, I think, to be honest. It wasn't until I started studying the lake. I could not get past it. This is what I stay up at night with, by the way. If people want to know what keeps me up and why I can't sleep, it was Lake Von and Zernaki
Couldn't have
Tepe.
guessed that, Matt.
And so I'm just sitting there, kept up at night. I'm like, how does this one isolated site have this kind of sophistication and be connected to Sumer and have nothing else? It didn't make sense to me. So I went on old maps and Google terrain, and I just literally searched the entire lake. I went around, zoomed in, and went to every part of the lake looking at images, and then two places popped up that turns out related that they don't know are related. And that's what got so exciting about this, is that the first place I want to mention, and I'm going to say the last one for last. Okay. The first one is just absolutely incredible is called Cavus Tepe. Cavus. Ironically, there were many people online that shared images. You'll find this funny. That shared images of Cavus Tepe recently in the last month or two that didn't know they were Cavus Tepe and thought they were Peru. And they were using it as an example to say, look, this is the best sophistication of any megalith in the world. This is from Peru. Not knowing it wasn't Peru. It was Cavus Tepe, Turkey, and part of this unknown civilization they didn't know.
All the way across the world.
Yes.
God.
So when I discovered Cavus Tepe, that's when I knew. And then there was another one after that brought the whole thing home. But what you have at Cavus Tepe is, and that's the image I had handed you to.
Yeah.
Is that Cavus Tepe?
Well, this was Sharupa.
Yeah. Do you have yours really quick? It's on the. They're double sided here.
This one over here.
Yeah. Hand me back that for a second.
Okay. This says excavations of Sharupak.
Hold on to that one in your hand. Right. That's it right there.
Okay. This is the one
that's
from earlier.
It right there.
I will put this in the corner of the screen,
So,
and you're going to send me the digital file.
Now, and I want to talk about this while you're looking at it because I think it'd be good. Do you see how there's stones that look like the dark stones in the top left of that structure right here? See these?
Yeah.
That's the Eurasian civilization. Now, notice they didn't build out of the same stone.
Well,
you see that?
Yeah, they look different than the
because
others.
the other one's limestone. Limestone is one of the softest stones in the world. It's easily manipulated. The stone below it is basalt. And basalt is, if not the hardest, one of the hardest on Earth.
So it's above it and below it, right here in this.
And I'm going to tell you why that is in a second, which is very unusual. We actually don't have any other sites in the world where we have young stuff underneath. And I'll tell you why in a second. So those blocks are, and I am telling you this as someone, and Brian would echo this, and I'm sure Ben would, but that's among the finest, if not the finest, stone masonry in the world, right there at Cavus Tepe. It looks almost identical to the Valley Temple in Egypt in the way that the stones are fitted. And it also looks pretty similar to some parts of Peru with the type of stone fitting. Although I will say, and we're going to get into this in a second, the nature of the building in Peru is a little bit more organic, and it actually looks more similar to Zernaki Tepe, whereas the building in Cavus Tepe looks like Egypt, which when you find out, you'll find there are two different people, and they went different directions in the world. Mm-hmm. But what the point I'm going to make, and we're going to get to in a second, is that this was the starting point of an entire new civilization that became the most advanced civilization in our planet's history.